Human babies are useless, completely medically useless, for roughly a year. And somehow that turned into our greatest evolutionary trick. Let's compare. A baby giraffe stands within an hour of birth. A wildebeest calf runs from predators the same day. A foal walks in 2 hours. A human baby, after a full year, might sit up. Might. We are the worst mammals at being born, by a significant margin. So here's the question nobody asks. How did anything this helpless survive 2 million years? Be honest. You have held a baby and thought, this thing would not last one night outside. You were right. It wouldn't. Let's start with why we're built this badly. Around 2 million years ago, human brains started growing. Fast. Habilis, about 600 cubic centimeters. Erectus, around 900. Us, about 1,350. Meanwhile, the pelvis was doing the opposite. Walking upright needs a narrow pelvis. Wide hips waste energy with every step. So one thing had to give. Anthropologist Sherwood Washburn named this in 1960. The obstetrical dilemma. The solution evolution picked was not clever. It just kicked the baby out early. Unfinished, half-built, shipped before testing. Here are the numbers. A chimpanzee is born with about 40% of its adult brain size. A human baby, about 28%. We arrive less finished than our closest relatives. That is not a flex. Some researchers argue a human pregnancy should run 18 to 21 months. That's how long it would take to be born as capable as a chimp. Nobody told the pelvis, so we get the 4th trimester. 3 months of gestation that happen in your arms, instead of inside a body. Which brings us to the part nobody planned for. Someone has to carry this thing, all day, every day, for years. A human infant needs to be carried until roughly age 4. Chimp infants cling to their mothers themselves. They grip fur, they hold on. Human babies have nothing to grip. We lost our fur about 1 million years ago. So the baby became a permanent object you hold. Now, do the maths on one person. She has to feed herself, she has to find water, she has to sleep sometimes, and she has to not be eaten. One exhausted person cannot do all 4. The numbers don't work. They have never worked. So people did the only thing available. They handed the baby to somebody else, and that changed the species. Anthropologists call it cooperative breeding. Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy built the case for it in her 2009 book, Mothers and Others. Her argument is blunt. Human mothers were never meant to do this alone. The design assumed helpers. The Hadza of Tanzania gave researchers the clearest data. Hadza infants spend roughly half their time being held by someone who is not the mother. Grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, unrelated adults in camp. One study counted more than a dozen different people holding a single infant in a day. 14. Your mother helping with your kid is not a favor. It's 2 million years of programming running on schedule. She doesn't have a choice, neither do you. Now, for the part that sounds like a joke, grandmothers may be the reason our species exists. Not sentimentally, statistically. Here's the problem it solves. Almost no mammal lives long past its reproductive years. Females of most species breed until they die. Human women stop around 50 and then live for decades. Evolution does not usually pay for people who can't reproduce. So something must be buying those years back. Kristen Hawkes tested this with the Hadza in the 1990s. She followed grandmothers with digging sticks. They were pulling tubers out of hard ground for hours a day. Older women foraged more hours than mothers with infants, and the food went to grandchildren. Hawkes measured what that did. Children with an active grandmother nearby gained weight faster. Their mothers had the next baby sooner. More surviving grandchildren carrying her genes, which is exactly what evolution counts. The verdict is harsh when you say it plainly. You're more useful as a grandmother than as a mother at this point. Harsh, accurate. It even shows up in historical records. Finnish and Canadian church registers from the 1700s and 1800s tracked thousands of families. Mila Laudenpera published the analysis in Nature in 2004. Every 10 years, a grandmother survived past 50. Her family gained roughly 2 extra grandchildren, but only if she lived nearby. Distance killed the effect entirely, which is one way of describing modern life. Fathers show up in the same data, and the results are less flattering. In several of those populations, losing a father had little measurable effect on child survival. Losing a grandmother did. You can argue about why. The pattern is in the registers. So who else was doing the work? Mostly children. Among the Hadza and the Maya, kids as young as 6 carry younger siblings for hours. They feed them, distract them, haul them around camp. Karen Kramer studied Maya families in Yucatan and found children contributed real labor from early ages, not helping, working. 6-year-olds raising toddlers was ordinary for most of human history, which explains a lot about why your older sibling is the way they are. And then there are the fathers. Barry Hewlett spent years with the Aka in Central Africa in the 1980s. He counted who was holding the baby hour by hour. Aka fathers held their infants around a fifth of the time in camp. That's the highest father involvement ever recorded in any human society. They were within arm's reach of the baby for roughly half the day. And Hewlett recorded something stranger. When the baby cried and the mother was away, the father offered his own nipple. There's no milk. There was never going to be milk. But sucking calms an infant whether or not anything comes out. It buys 20 minutes until the mother gets back, which is exactly the kind of solution the system runs on. Not ideal, sufficient. Your dad almost certainly did not hold you a fifth of the time. By the standards of the species, that's the unusual arrangement, not the Aka one. Now here's where the story turns. All of this handing around had a side effect nobody selected for. A chimp infant looks at one face all day. It's mother's. A human infant looks at a rotating cast. So human babies had to learn something chimps never needed. Reading people. Which face is friendly? Who will pick me up? Who is about to leave? Look at your own eyes for a second. Humans are the only primates with visible white sclera around the iris. Every other ape has dark sclera that hides where they are looking. Ours advertises it. Hiroki Kobayashi and Shiro Koshima published this comparison in 2001. They compared eyes across more than 80 primate species. Only humans broadcast their gaze, which is useless if you're hunting alone, and extremely useful if you're a helpless baby being passed between 6 adults. Sound familiar? It should. You do this constantly. You read a room in under a second. You know when someone is annoyed before they say a word. That skill was built by infancy, not by adulthood. Helplessness forced us to become social. Nobody designed it. It just happened. The brain had big plans. The pelvis was not consulted. And the baby paid for both. Let's talk about how the milk worked, because that shaped everything too. Hunter-gatherer mothers nursed for 3 to 4 years. Not a bottle in sight for 2 million years. Nursing that long suppresses ovulation and spaces births out, which is the only reason the system didn't collapse. A mother with 4 infants at once would have been finished. Farming broke that spacing. Once grain existed, babies could be weaned early onto porridge. Birth intervals dropped from 4 years to 2. More children, born faster, weaker at weaning. Child mortality in early farming villages was brutal. Across many pre-industrial populations, roughly a quarter of children died before their first birthday. Close to half never reached 15. Those numbers held until about a century ago, which means every ancestor you have won a coin flip, repeatedly. Now think about how that survival actually worked day to day. Nobody was watching one child. Everybody was half watching all of them. A child who wandered off past 4 adults before reaching the edge of camp. Any one of them could pick her up. That is not a village being nice. That is a redundancy system. Break one link and 3 others hold. Now compare that to your flat. 2 adults, maybe 1. No backup. Ancient parents had a dozen hands within shouting distance. You have a group chat. If parenting feels impossible, that's because it is. You were never meant to do it alone. The manual assumed a village. You got a flat. There's one more piece, and it's the strangest. The crying. A human newborn's cry sits in a frequency range that is physically hard to ignore. It raises heart rate in adults who aren't even related to the baby, which is the point. A baby that only its mother responded to would die whenever she was busy. So evolution made the alarm work on everyone. That's why a stranger's baby on a plane wrecks your nervous system. You are responding correctly. 2 million years correctly. The whole system rests on one thing, other people showing up. Not out of kindness, out of arithmetic. The maths only closes with helpers in it. Take the helpers out and the species doesn't make it. So the helplessness was never solved. It was distributed. A giraffe stands in an hour because it has to. Nobody is coming to hold it. A human baby doesn't have to stand. Somebody always was. So next time you see your mum, maybe say thanks. Or at minimum, acknowledge that she kept a genuinely useless mammal alive for several years. That's not nothing. Who held you when your parents couldn't? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.